At one point, someone had asked me of my opinion on what jobs might be seen in Final Fantasy XIV. I answered very briefly with, well, I'm not too sure. Yoshida did say he wanted to make original jobs for the game. This of course sparked conversation of jobs showing up in the game. I for one wanted to be honest and wait for the next job to be debuted, but no one wants to be quiet. So after watching Brian's video over at Work to Game, by the way, sub and watch all of their stuff, the gears in my head started turning and the topic started to come up and arguing with itself in my brain. I first tried telling myself to shut the hell up. That didn't work. So I started to brainstorm about the mini-jobs that may show up. Through mini-games in the Final Fantasy universe, this includes Bravely Default, I was able to think of mini-jobs that could fit the mold in 14. Now, I'm not gonna go crazy with this. I'd be here all day and people like me need to occupy themselves with new things. I.e. I have a Switch now because of the kind folks over on my stream. Come and join for the fun if you're not busy, or if you are very busy and want to show your coworkers, introduce them to my channel so they can also be distracted at work. Syncweaver is not liable for any dumb decisions, so yeah. So this is how it's gonna work. I'll start with the tank, then move on to the DPS, and then end it off with the healer. One new job per class, keeping it simple. Again, we don't want to be here all day. So let's get started. Oh, and if you have jobs to fill the role of tank, DPS, and healer for 14, let me know in the comments below or in my Discord. Links in the description. Okay, here we go. Starting out with my personal favorite class of jobs, we begin with the tank, the most defensive and sturdy of the classes. Now I will admit, when Brian from Work 2 Game talked about a tank class with a pet, I thought immediately of WildStar, and evidently so did he. The engineer from WildStar, actually. They used cute little mini-mechs to actually take on the brunt of the attacks, and often help aggro, support, distract, heal, and even enhance the player for survivability or killability. And even though I say the mech take on many of the attackers, the engineer is also outfitted with heavy armor and can take on much of the damage themselves. So the engineer, even though they are long range, were the kind of tank that was way technical and was very unique for what it was. That's why I think the puppeteer, or puppet master, would be a great fit for 14. As someone who never used it personally in 11, I have very little experience with puppeteer in any game, so this will be quite the explanation from me, or I'm just going to make a fool of myself, like a dumbass. The puppeteer comes from 11, from the Arabic-inspired country of Al-Turgan. Using magic to manipulate the hardened soldier, aka a remote control, you find yourself being supported in combat rather than you being the one on the front lines by yourself. You'd have a puppet that had interchangeable parts to suit the situation or make it even stronger. I envision 14's puppeteer to be something similar, only the puppet master would be a ranged physical fighter with heavy enough armor just in case, and use chakrons for range or close combat. Chakrons in this case being tools for entertainment when used by people who watched sword dancers back in the day, acting as boomerangs at a distance and daggers up close. Puppeteers were originally conceived as entertainers in the first place, so it kinda suits it. The puppets could also use chakrons and would often mimic the puppeteer's movement for effective collaborating skills. Of course, if the master is ever in danger, the puppet would take control in automation and protect its master, a defense mechanism to make sure the puppeteer is safe. The puppet would also have mini skills in line with the master to keep aggro, and the master would move with the puppet for specific skills involving the puppet's movement, or by themselves when they want to support the puppet with buffs or heals. The chakron would be extra damage of course, but as a fun little homage to Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and because it would be cool, you could lend your weapon to the puppet for extra damage or for certain skills that could debuff enemies while you had already imbued the chakron with magic for the debuff beforehand. Puppeteer would be 14's first tinky pet class, with a ton of skill needed to master it. A challenge, yes, but fun all the same, as long as we get Muppet skins for the puppets, however, because an ass-kicking Kermit the Frog would be hilarious. As a game that already has DPS out the wazoo, why exactly am I adding to the deck of cards we call the crap ton of DPS classes? Well, to be fair, every class deserves a chance to grow, especially the support group. Bard and Machinist just doesn't cut it anymore, and it's already hard enough for me to like a class to get it to level 34, meaning I don't like it all that much, and I honestly would like something that could be closer to the mobs, while still keeping their own as support, without just being shoot stuff McBuffs a lot. That's why I chose Dancer as the next DPS support class. There has been talk of Dancer showing up in 14, but how they would play has been up for debate for a long while now. I believe they would be close combat with a ton of support for the team, buffing them with spirited dancing for speed and power, and even skills for supporting the healers. No, not just mana regen, but perhaps increasing the range for heals or affecting their potency. Healers don't really get much in support when it comes to Bard and Machinist, but Dancer could fit the mold. As the Dancer does their thing in the field, the tank would be able to use cooldowns faster, spells would have more potency, and buffs will stack with buffs for DPS skills, both support and attack types. As the Dancer, you would also have incredibly fast combat, keeping up with even the fastest of ninjas, focusing on dexterity rather than strength or magic. We'll see a fast but low power DPS with attack speed overpowering that of any DPS in the game. With low power, speed would be the solution. So Dancer would make for a great closed-in combatant, with support that could reach everyone. Being near the enemy gives way for buffs to the party, and if mages want that buff, they need to get a bit closer. Basically, if you want to see that thickness, then you need to be right next to their ass. Quack. Now, in place of being basically gods in their own right, healers need to be proficient at heals, regions, buffs, and resurrects. Now, the game had already hinted at a class that I'm thinking they're working on right now, but why not get a head start? With Astros being a mix of Scholar and White Mage, we really don't have an attack healer in actuality. Now, you could argue Scholar, but even still, they have to heal and shield the party every now and then. If I were to make any comparison to attack healers, I would look at Bridget in Overwatch, but since we're going with mages for healers, and I'm sure Yoshida isn't going to budge about the whole physical healer thing, let's just stick with Geomancer. Now, this class I've actually had a bit of experience with, as in I played a ton of it in 3, but nonetheless it's experience. Geomancers draw power from the earth, unlike their counterparts the astrologians who draw power from the stars. Now, elements isn't really a thing in 14 unless you go to Eureka, and by god if they change the base game to this, I'ma quit. Seriously. Instead, the Geomancer could change stances for whatever element they wish to use, like the first would be Earth for shield and protection. The Earth stance could be about protecting the party while hindering the enemy's movement, much like sandstorms could blind or trees could bind. Think of a rock tripping up a foe, or an avalanche pushing enemies away, or you could go the route of actually bringing back stone skin and, why not, make them better by giving them layers for multiple hits and exploding off the party members when they get hit just to add to the salt. Earth can be used in so many ways. The one I'm looking for the most, however, is a custom meteor attack, or at least something like Genesis Rock from the OG Dissidia.
Allow me to give time to party. Creature of brutality.
The next would be water. Ice would have a similar binding effect, but would also slow the enemy. The water element could also be the regen factor, and would be more the main healer stance when protection doesn't cut it. Think water as the ultimate healing stance, and being the soothing regen out of all the arsenal. Ice being the only means of offense, but being downplayed for the healing factor that water can muster. You know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see healing rain that could remove debuffs and poison while regenning the entire party. Now, fire would be your offensive stance, along with the main source of buffing your party. Fire magic could be used to do direct damage while healing and buffing the party through offensive means. Strength, crit, and magic potency would be the main buff, but all in all, you would benefit most for dishing out damage while healing the party, and fire does spread in reality. Sparks could fly off enemies, and that could buff or heal the party members nearest to them, while damaging and debuffing the enemies with burns and stuns. The enemies essentially becomes a target for the DPS, and beacons for temporary buffs. And last we have Wind, the crit dex speed buff stance that could use continuous healing winds for slow buffs and slow debuffs. Now, I know healing wind is a limit break, but why? Why is it a limit break anyway, when Geomancer could use healing wind to safeguard from AoE effects, or give speed boosts in movement or attack, specifically weapon skills or auto attacks? And why the hell not let's get wind shields for magical protection? Wind is a bit harder to come up with moves for, but at least you get the concept. Wind can be good for AoE uses, and to possibly keep the DPS out of killing themselves, because an AoE healing area, if they're smart, would keep them alive long enough for you to care. So those are what I could see in 14. 14 as new classes. One actually may be in the game in the near future, and the other two needing some work and polish to fit in. But a good possibility for them to have some sort of concept. And as I said before, let me know in the comments below on what jobs you think would fit in 14 as new jobs. I'm sure if you leave your ideas on the internet, someone will care. Someone, I think. And as always, thanks for watching, and let's hope Geomancer doesn't turn out to be as linear or as boring as I think it may be. If it exists, and if it ever comes out. Yoshida, please make this one good. Please?